we have to admit that every single thing that happens in our life happens to me, happens to this entity within me that we refer to here as ego. And I mean everything. Every thought is mine. Every emotion is mine. All actions are mine. Ownership is mine. My perceptions are mine. Everything comes back to this sense of me. We run everything through this sense of I, this sense of individual. And to demonstrate this point, I want to use an example of doing nothing. Even an ego, when sitting in silence, in sitting and just relaxing, doing nothing, there is still an ego doing that nothing. An ego always, no matter what it is doing that. It's all on behalf of this ego. And what this message is pointing to is that true peace happens when you're sitting doing nothing, that nobody's doing that nothing. That nothing is literally happening, and in that you experience peace. So, how do we end this entity that we've taken ourselves to be inside of us here, this sensation of me? How do we end that so that we get out of these relentless cycles of happiness and unhappiness, peace and unease? Well, first, we have to realize the many, many, many facets of ego. And to do that, I like to say, like, this is the first phase of self-inquiry. When you're sitting there in silence with your eyes closed and your ego is pushing you, it wants to get up and do something different than sitting in silence. And these are all nothing but opportunities. I like to say they are loving reminders to remind you of who you are not, so that you can turn your attention within to remind yourself of who you are. So let's run through these multiple shape-shifting identities of ego, and you can see what I'm talking about. And this is just a list of 20. We all probably have like 500. But over time, that 500 goes to 250, goes to 100, goes to 50, and it just dies down. This ego dies down. So, look at this list. Number 1, the efforter. This ego is a doer. It's a thinker. It's a knower. It efforts everything, even the nothingness in the example. It's efforting nothing. That's why you can never sit in true peace and silence when you believe you're doing nothing from the stance of an efforter. And so the first list is what the ego is, one of its many facets. And the second column is how we combat those outward efforts of ego so that we start to eliminate them. So an ego is an efforter. So any sort of effort that's coming through you that you sense, you then say to yourself, who is this I that efforts? And in that, the ego will, you could say, obey itself and turn its attention inward towards self. And every time this movement happens, these efforts die down. And you can get very specific. in all of these types of efforting that the ego does. I mean, number 2, it's the boarder. I mean, it at first takes self-inquiry to be extremely boring, and it will use that effort to try to get you to get up and move away from self-inquiry. But again, this is an opportunity. The opportunity to say, who is this I that is bored? Number 3, this was a big one for me, the scenarioer. I love to run scenarios through my head. I'm an entrepreneur, and it seems like my business models and ideas are just like, what if I did this? And maybe what would the client think of that? And what if I changed this? And it would just run off into these scenarios, these, you could say, problem solving. And this is when you catch that and you say, who is this I that scenarios? The anxieter, yes. This was my favorite pastime a few years ago. Who is this I that's anxious? The judger, the doubter. This is the big one. Self-doubt is one of the main reasons why we don't know ourselves, because we've been trained to think, to believe that our self does not have these qualities that this message of non-duality is claiming that you have. So in this example, who is this I that doubts? Confused. I get this a lot in my one-on-ones. It's just confusing. I don't know what's going on. Who is this I that's confused? Fear. The fearer. Yes, this was another one of my favorite pastimes. Who is this I that fears? Angry. Frustrated. Who's frustrated in self-inquiry? You know, it goes down to the next one. The doesn't get it, or I don't get this. I'm not getting this. I'm not smart enough to get this. Maybe I'm not meant for this. Who is this I that's frustrated? Who is this I that doesn't get it? Do you see? Every single movement away from peace and silence and stillness is the ego trying to get you to go somewhere else but to peace. And these are only opportunities. Not good at self-inquiry. Yes, a big one of the ego. You suck at this. You can't get this. This is for everybody else but you. Use that as an opportunity. The imaginationer. Even that. You imagine, you're creating. Nope, that's all a movement away from self. So who is this I that imagines? The shamer, the guilter, the seeker. Who is this one off on this journey to peace and happiness? Who is this I that seeks? The achiever, the desirer. Who desires happiness? Who desires fulfillment? Who is this I that desires? Who is this I that wants peace? Who is this I that wants satisfaction? The worrier, the skepticer. Again, and you have to apply your experience, which is coming through you due to your conditioning. Every one of these is nothing but an opportunity to catch it as it's efforting itself through you, either through your mind or your body or your 5 senses. You're catching that as it's moving out, and you're picking them up with the question of who is this I, and you're drawing that back within. Now, these outward efforts are known as your vasanas, or your will. These are your tendencies to move you away from yourself. And hence why this question of who is this I is so powerful. It's the one question that picks up these outward moving tendencies and draws them back in. And the more you pick these up and draw them back in, the less they come out. They lose their power. So they might still come out, but they don't come out with the power and force that they used to have. And the more that you draw these back in, they literally die down and go to zero. And the experience of that is peace. When there's no more outward efforts, internal, mental, physical, perception efforts, that is known as peace and happiness and satisfaction, wholeness, completeness, everything that you're after in this message. And then after a while, you can start to play the nothing game with yourself, where you're sitting and you're starting to realize the difference of true doing nothing relative to somebody who used to do nothing. Somebody that used to desire peace and contentment. And you'll realize that those were all just concepts of the ego. The ego can never, ever, ever know what true peace and happiness is. And in this doing nothing, let me rephrase that. You're not doing nothing anymore. Nothing is happening. And in that nothing happening, that's when true, absolute peace is realized and experienced. Take care.